I'd like to just say a couple of words about what Philip Newman meant in my life particularly during the time at IU, because he was house husband, and it meant after long days when he would be working at home, composing, or whatever needed to be done, he would pick me up at the end of the day. What, is that wonderful or what? Because it means you don't have to find a parking place. But then we would go for a little ride until I began to yawn. And then he'd know that it was okay to go home now because I was relaxed enough that I didn't have to keep spinning in the way. See, Harsty had said to me one time, he said, well, you realize that you're breaking ground for women at IU, don't you? And I said, well, I don't think of myself so much as a woman. I grew up with two wonderful brothers. I think of myself as a person. And it was Jerry Harsty who was recommending a book, to me about women in academia, and I said, Jerry, I don't need to read a book about women in academia. I am a woman, I am in academia, but I don't think of it as being a woman. I think of myself as an academic who has been greatly blessed in being dropped into a variety of circumstances that prepared me to do what I'm doing today. I took advantage of what was called the 1820 Early Retirement Plan, and during those next 5 years, when I received a modified salary from IU, I had one of my favorite students who became my last doctoral student working with me, and it was Patty Seamantel, who subsequently has worked with me for 2 or 3 years on the book. Patty, before she became a doctoral student, was a top-flight secretary, executive secretary. But when she was in one of my classes, and I was aware of what a fine mind she had, and I encouraged her to assist me one summer, and during that time to help me with the adult literacy class that I had started. I kind of bootlegged this adult literacy class because it wasn't something that IU was willing to pay for at that time, but it was so needed in the state, and I'm very pleased to be able to say that as a result of those adult literacy classes, we have literacy programs all over the state of Indiana. Well, Patty was one of the doctoral students then that came through all of that with me, and subsequently worked with me on the development of the book. She was much more than a secretary, because having completed her doctoral dissertation on literacy programs in Indiana, she was just preeminently equipped to help me think through what I wanted to say about the literacy programs in Indiana. So during those, the years from, well, as I say, 94 to 99, were completing her doctoral dissertation, winding up other kinds of things with IU, filling my garage with boxes of things which I gradually am working my way through. And then in the early 2000s, I came upon an opportunity to be in England as an unpaid companion to a woman in Somerset who had lost her husband. He was a Grand Prix owner, and his teams had won 9 Grand Prix races. The house was filled with these gorgeous, beautiful silver urns But having answered an ad that appeared in the Christian Science Monitor, I was able to spend over a number of years, 4 months the next year, 3 months the next year, and finally 2 months the last year in this incredible 300-year-old Georgian house in Somerset. So that was a really very special thing. I'd like to just say a little bit about other travel experiences, because when I had been, when I was at IU, there was too much going on. I worked in the summer because that's when we had teachers, and I worked all during the year. And it wasn't until I started being invited to travel for the International Reading Association. For example, I was asked to represent IRA at UNESCO in Paris for 2 weeks, and so I sat with the earphones on, listening to these simultaneous translations, and every once in a while meeting somebody in the lobby and being able to talk with them about literacy and so forth. It was a very, people say, gosh, you were at UNESCO, and gosh, you were in Paris. Well, I sat for 2 rainy weeks at UNESCO listening through these earphones. I didn't really do much except get fruit on the way home and enjoy the flavor of Paris. But other trips that I had during those years were quite remarkable. There was a friend who kind of picked me up after Phil had passed on. And this friend and I made trips to Paris and to Nice and to Venice. And I initiated a trip with my friend Karen Shepard, who had spearheaded a lot of things for me, but one of them was my getting the Indiana Humanities Council Lifetime Achievement Award. And that was kind of an amazing thing, because the first winner had been Chancellor Wells. I'm not sure I have the order of this, but the second was Father Heschberg, Notre Dame, and I was the third. So it was dear Karen, you see, that that worked out, that started the ball rolling on all this, because she and I had become such special friends. But it was Philip Newman and I that cleaned up that application that resulted in my getting that award. So, but I mention that because Karen was the one with whom I traveled to England to go to the Chelsea Flower Show, and then we traveled all around Wales and made our way back to finally find the airport and get ourselves back to the States. And it was Karen with whom I went to southern France and went to a cooking school for a week. And, so there were a lot of nice, really special travel experiences, but they were, the capstone was this experience of going to England over a period of maybe about 6 years for long stints. My brother Chester was president of Mountaineers one year. He and his darling wife, Wanda, had done so much with the Mountaineers in the Seattle area, and it was Chester who was president the year that they were able to get this huge area in the Northern Cascades set aside as a wilderness area. So Chet, whenever I would go to Seattle, Chet would take me to the mountains. We would lie on our sleeping bags on the side of Mount Rainier and count the stars while the bear was getting into the car and eating our grapes. And, they were wonderful experiences that I had with him in the woods. So when Phil and I built this house in 1990, I fell in love with it's about maybe half an acre behind the house. Woods. I said, this is my park. And we had 3 truckloads of grapevines that we pulled down. I felt like Jane, as in Jane and Tarzan, because I'd get on those grapevines and pull until they came down, and then we'd load them on, and this wonderful old guy with his truck, we'd load up his truck and away he'd go. So we spent a lot of time at the beginning just clearing. It was for me, it's been a love affair with the woods. I just, in developing, I think of it as my woodland park. We had in Seattle a park called Woodland Park. And so this is Anabel's Woodland Park out behind the house. Each year we try to do something. And we started trails that were kind of natural ways to walk around the woods. There were beautiful rock formations, and my first gardener, Sherry Holliday, and I recognized that here was this set of rocks that were just made for a rock garden. So we worked on that, and we've done the steps and so forth. Well, the last 3 years have been devoted to the ponds, and I'm here to tell you, get a pond professional to work with you on ponds. Do not try to do it yourself, because you'll waste a lot of time and money. You'll think you're saving money. You're not. You're wasting it. I finally got professionals last year, and they came in and tore up what we had already done, tore out the quickcrete, rearranged the rocks, and developed these 2 sweet little waterfalls. I love them. I go out on my deck and look down and see the fish. So it's been really a wonderful, satisfying development for me. It takes a lot of time. It takes more money than I ever want to think about in terms of the paying people to do what needs to be done. But it's been worth it. It's been a very satisfying hobby, and we are set aside as a national habitat. I have a little paper that says, anyway, I've forgotten the name of the organization, but we're nationally recognized as part of this whole effort to keep trees as part of our experience, to cherish what nature gives us and be careful with it, and keep it coming. The birds love it. I love it. It's been a really satisfying, wonderful development. We got started on the book when Warren Lewis came, and we were having bean soup together in the sunroom. And I was telling Warren about some of the experiences I'd had in literacy, and he said, "Oh, those are wonderful." He said, "You've got to write that." And so Warren had been editor for me on several publications. We'd done a big one on prison literacy, and I'd done one with Carolyn Beverstock, and he'd edited that and so forth. So I'm just crazy about Warren, and he is a wonderful editor. He'd worked with an organization on campus here as senior editor for them for years, so it was a blessing for me. And he was in retirement now, and he said, "I'll edit for you." So we started thinking about, what can be the chapters in this book? And of course, the long-range experience that I'd had working with the Cedar Rapids children who had been low groupers in first grade in 1964, I had followed all the way through. Some of them finished college. So that was a longitudinal study. And the findings of that were, when we began to really closely examine them, were what led us to the title of this, M2IP3, because we found that what made a difference was what had been happening with models in people's experience? Or what role did motivation play? And did interest obviously made a huge difference when I watched them in the practicum center, when I followed these later on, and were they able to persevere, and what was the role of positive pressure? So M2IP3 came about as the short title. The long title, The Role of Model, Motivation, Interest, Perseverance, and Positive Pressure in Teaching Reading to Challenged Readers. And so it's been about a 3-year effort, with Patty pitching in the last couple of years and Warren standing by as our wonderful editor. I couldn't have done it without those two. I was just tremendously blessed with 3 awards that I'd like to mention. One was the Indiana Humanities Council Lifetime Achievement Award. And I think I mentioned that already, so I'm not going to say anything more about that. The awards that I received for outstanding alumni were from Principia College and from the State University of New York at Buffalo. And they were complete surprises to me, and I treasure them both. One of the really special things that happened over the years was the receiving of the Ella Victoria Dobbs National Research Award. And my marvelous department chairman, Leo Fay, told my fellow faculty members, most of whom were men, that they now had to sit up and pay attention to Anabel because she had gotten a national award. To tack on to what I said about the scholarship that I got to go to Principia was a lovely journalism award that I got when I was in high school, and then there was a $500 scholarship award that I got that took me to the University of Washington. So throughout my life, I've had these wonderful things come to me that have helped me along the way. Throughout the years, as I grew, as I like to think that I grew as a Christian Scientist, I was very active first in the college org at the University of Washington, and then in the college org at Principia. And I was on the org board by the time I reached my senior year at Prin. Well, in the 50s, I went to the Mother Church and worked there for a summer. And this will be a surprise to my friends now, but I worked on the computers, and I was asked to go and take training and be in charge of their computer department. And this will make my friends now just laugh hilariously. But I turned it down because I had a contract at Principia, which I felt that I must honor. The activities in the branch churches grew from my years in Sunday school when I was in Seattle, and then after I graduated from Principia, I joined the branch church in Elsa and was immediately put in as a Sunday school teacher, which I then subsequently taught Sunday school for probably 60 years, as well as being superintendent when I was in Sunday school here in Bloomington. And then Phil and I were org advisors in the 70s. And so over the years, I've held almost every position in branch churches. I was reader in the Iowa City Church, second reader there, and I've been first and second reader in the Bloomington Church. And these activities in branch church work they're kind of the backbone of my experience. The periodicals that we get from our Boston Mother Church are a constant support to me. Part of the family that became so precious to me was the Chicago branch. My nephew, Gary, who was my brother Gene's son, Gary Powell married lovely Rindy Powell. And their wedding was very special because I stood up as mother figure for them, and subsequently have been very close to that whole family, including the Smiths, Rindy's mom and dad, and now their children, Megan, who has gone on as a reading teacher, master's in reading, and Bethany, who has taken on a considerable responsibility in finance. They're both married now, and I treasure them both especially. I have other nephews that I'm very, very fond of. I've spent more time with Rindy and Gary, and it was very hard for me to say goodbye to Gary several years ago. One of the wonderful people in Phil and my lives was his mother's best friend, Ina Parham Story. Ina was an art student of Hans Hofmann. Hans Hofmann was perhaps the very most outstanding teacher of abstract expressionism in the early part of the, well, let's see, was it early? Yes, part of the 20th century. And Ina painted all over the country, but mostly things that she did in New York City, subsequently in Monterey, in New Mexico, and then later on she was painting in Santa Barbara. And it was in Santa Barbara that we were so close to her. We would visit out there. We'd see Phil's Aunt Margaret, and we would see Ina and some of their friends and just have such lovely times. So I feel immensely honored, grateful, and blessed to have in my home paintings that Ina gave us years ago or we bought, and I'm already figuring out exactly how to distribute them. Some will go to Principia. Out of this wonderful exposure to art that I got through Ina's paintings and through the work with Frank Parker, and subsequently going to Principia summer sessions, where I had a marvelous instructor by the name of Jerry Grimmer, and over 3 or 4 or 5 summers I was able to paint with Jerry, and I look forward to doing that again if I can. I have very few regrets in my life, but one of them is that I didn't have a horse to ride. Every time I could get near a pony, I was in 7th heaven. So when we'd go to Woodland Park in Seattle, I'd beg to go on the pony rides, and my brother Gene made sure that I got to ride on a pony down on the farm. I've been close to the possibility of riding. The Robinson Longs tried to help me get on a horse one time, and it was so far up that I couldn't wait to get down. But no, I didn't learn to ride. I didn't learn to fly a plane, although I did fly a plane twice. I flew once from Bloomington to Kentucky with a friend, and then I flew a hydroplane in Seattle once with a boyfriend. So my two kind of unfulfilled were partially fulfilled: riding a horse and flying an airplane. I was born on a Sunday. There's a little thing about Sunday's child. I feel that I have been lifted throughout a lifetime, which I don't see as being over yet by any means, but lifted and exposed and prayerfully supported by my church, by my friends, Certainly by my experience at Principia, I feel that I've led a really blessed experience. Started out playing with string and sticks on the farm, had no playmates, have never lived alone, have always had support from friends in the dormitory. Oh, I did live alone for a few months in Kansas City until we were married, and then we were married and so forth. So over the years, it's been a Christ expression of religion in my life, of friendship that has blessed me at every turn, of employment, of a dwelling that I love, and a surrounding of people and things that have great meaning to me, and that I think have been a blessing to others also.